Calling the roll, Mr. Schron.
Here.
Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly is absent. Ms. Simon. Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Present.
You have a quorum. And as a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page.
Is there any public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have one person signed in for public comment. Lou?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Today, I'm only here just to support County Council, no matter which committees, when you support mixed-use, multi-use projects for the county, because this will be a better way to make sure different kinds of people, different kinds of subpopulations in our county can be taken care of. Not just only one group of people or only for one a little geographic area. The more mixed-use projects we have, actually that helps all different people gradually, so all the people will have something they can get a help to improve their quality of life. And this is very important, especially with a subcommittee in the community development that we should look for some other ways to ensure that all the county folks getting helped. This particular committee, definitely you can take a very good position to ensure this is a good accusations for, it's a good way to carry out the mission the county government actually is there for. It's for the people, all the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Liu. Is there anyone else?
That concludes our public comment.
Okay. We have minutes from the July 10th meeting. Has everybody a chance to look at those?
Motion to approve.
So been moved. Second?
Second.
Been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none opposed. Minutes are approved. Sorry about that. I should have asked for comment on the minutes. Unanimous. We have one matter to come before us, and we have a proposed substitute that's been suggested by the administration. So if we could read it into the record, please.
Resolution 2023-0151, amending resolution number R 2022-0445, dated December 8th, 2022, which authorized an economic development loan in the amount not to exceed $1,700,000 to FMCFP LLC, excuse me, or its designee, to assist with funding project costs of a mixed-use development project located at 10300 Cedar Avenue in the city of Cleveland, to amend the terms of the loan as originally presented.
And then we have a substitute that's been submitted. Has everybody a chance to take a look at that so we can at least get it on the record and have a conversation? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm not going to be supporting the substitution because of the way this came before us, so I'm going to be a no vote.
Okay, that's fine with as far as the vote. Historically, we've at least had an opportunity to present it for conversation. So.
Well, the other members can do that. I don't
okay,
think
the chair will move the substitute so we can have a conversation about it. Is there,
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of having the substitute for consideration, say aye.
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 No.
One no. The substitute is now before us. Can we have somebody present to us as to why there's a substitute being presented?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Herdig, Director, Department of Development. I do have a handout. Sharon, do I give it to you or? To the chairman, in order to speak about the substitute, I really need to talk about the project. It's kind of confusing to talk about the substitute without the project. So with the chair's permission, I'll go ahead and speak about the project and why we're before Council's Economic Development Committee today. Sharon, I can, just a few slides. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we're here this afternoon to discuss again the project that's being built at the corner of East 105th Street and Cedar Avenue. This is at the end of Opportunity Corridor where it runs into the Cleveland Clinic. This project has not changed since it was discussed and voted in favor of by County Council in December. It is still a project to build just under 200 apartment units above a 40,000 square feet Meijer grocery store. The project is well along in its construction. There's great activity happening and is on track to meet its projected schedule to have the Meijer grocery store open in the near future and to lease up the apartments. We are here today because there have been two business changes in the project that we felt were something that ought to be discussed with both our loan review committee, the Cuyahoga County Community Improvement Corporation, and with County Council. The two business changes are as follows. Let me mention first, this project, as I noted, is on an Opportunity Corridor. It's very important to the city of Cleveland, and in fact, Director Terry Hamilton Brown from Cleveland is here to speak after I have finished speaking and answering any questions. It is also an important part of the Opportunity Corridor plan, and the Cleveland Clinic is thoroughly engaged in bringing forward this project. And, to lead up to why we're here, this project started just as COVID completely disrupted construction supply chains. There's been hyperinflation in construction costs due to COVID. Just for one example, the project had to switch from wood frame construction to steel frame construction because it was actually harder to get wood than to get steel. That's how things have gone during the construction period. Previously, with council's approval, we entertained and are ready or moving along towards closing a loan in the amount of $1.7 million from Cuyahoga County into the project. That has not changed. We're not recommending any change in the loan term, which is 20 years. Interest rate remains 2%. Interest-only payments for 3 years, followed by full amortization over the life of the loan. We are not changing the fact that we will have a subordinate security position in the project. There have been two business changes, as I said, since the time that this loan was originally approved. The first business change is that the funds from the Cleveland International Fund, sometimes called the EB5 fund run by Steve Sternmisha, although they are equity, have requested intercreditor agreements that give them rights such that we have to consider them as having higher priority than our loan in terms of our underwriting ratios. That is the first business change. And I would note that despite this, the funding, the $5 million from the Cleveland International Fund has already been fully put into the project. So they are not holding the project hostage. They are, however, asking to have their rights protected as an investor who made their commitment to the project before the costs increased, before there was any discussion of needing a county loan. The second business change is an additional loan of $1.5 million from an organization called Finance Fund. This is needed because the project has continued to have additional costs even since December. So to be able to meet the project's full costs, the additional loan of $1.5 million has been agreed upon with Finance Fund and is about to close. Finance Fund has asked to have level priority with the City of Cleveland's new money and with Cuyahoga County's money. Because they've asked to have equal priority with us in terms of looking at the underwriting ratios, that changes the calculation. Because of these two business changes, we asked the project to resubmit its financial information. We had our staff review the information again, and the one-page handout that I've provided shows our staff's analysis of this information. We have added in the payments to the Cleveland International Fund to what's called senior debt because we're now treating them as money that has a right to be paid before we do. We have added in the additional payments to the Finance Fund on the section where we show our payments because they have the right to be paid alongside us. The end result of this review, this reanalysis of the ratios, is before you on the page. There are two important numbers that go across every year. The first number is what we call the debt service coverage ratio, As you can see on the sheet before you, this ratio stays at or above 1.27 through the entire 11-year period we looked at. And our general guideline for considering our loans is 1.2. Therefore, considering these two business changes, we find the debt coverage ratio is still above our guideline. The second change we reviewed was the fact that we need to treat the finance fund as additional debt, and for purpose of loan-to-value ratio, we treated even the Cleveland International Fund as debt. With this analysis and looking at an income-based valuation of the project, we find that the ratio of loan-to-value, except for the first year, which is a construction year, is at or below 88% throughout the time period of the loan. Therefore, and our guideline is 90%. Therefore, we recommend continued approval of this loan so that we can proceed to closing. At this point, I'll pause for any questions for me, after which Terry Hamilton Brown and, of course, Adam Fishman for the project are ready to come speak.
Okay, as long as you're up there, I'm sure you're well aware that there was a meeting this morning. Can you give us your analysis? And we've all received literally information, I think, sent to us, and it was just handed to me as I sat up here.
Thank you, Councilman. This morning, a meeting was held of our Community Improvement Corporation. It needed to be called as a special meeting because of the timing of Cuyahoga County Council's meeting set for Tuesday, which it would be pointless to hold the meeting after council had voted tomorrow. At this meeting, we made essentially the same presentation you've just heard from me. Also, Adam Fishman spoke, and there was questioning of both of us. The end result of the meeting was a vote of 4 in favor, no opposed, and 3 abstentions.
Does the abstentions express concern as to why they're abstaining?
2 of the abstentions were persons who personally have investments in the property, and the other person who abstained did not express any reason on the record.
Okay, so other than the abstentions, it sounds like it was unanimous, if I'm understanding it correctly,
Yes, sir.
of the vote,
Yes, sir.
of those who voted.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Excuse me, Ms. Stevens, can you check your microphone, please?
You're right, it wasn't on.
Thank you.
Can you go over the capital stack for us? Do you have a slide with the capital stack in it and a comparison?
Councilwoman, we provided to you directly the.
Yes, you did, but I wanted to know whether you had one so we could see it here visually.
I don't have a copy
Okay.
with me.
So the total project cost increased approximately how much again?
The total project cost increased, I don't have the figures directly in front of me, a number of millions.
And one of the concerns was that the equity for the project decreased.
Thank you, Councilman. That is, that statement would only make sense if the Cleveland International Fund contribution were no longer considered as equity. Under the law for EB5 investments, that investment needs to be equity in order to fulfill the purpose for which the investors provided the money. So I cannot agree with the statement that that money should not be considered as equity.
Then why does it receive a priority above our funding? Because typically when you're equity, you're the last one to get funded, or your repayment, or you defer a certain amount of your repayment. Will EB5 defer until we are paid some of their repayment?
Thank you, Councilman. In this case, the answer is no. We've been asked to enter into an intercreditor agreement, which gives the repayment of this loan superior rights. The information we have excuse me, Councilman, forgive me.
I typically do not agree that equity, and I'm supportive of this because I know what construction costs have done to urban projects, but I'm concerned that they have it both ways. When you're equity, you wait for everybody else to be paid back, or you defer to a certain amount, and then you get a priority. Was there any concession made, if they're equity, to do a deferral until we had received, or parity with us? And so it's 4 in this level now instead of 3, and 1 for all 4 of us at the same time.
Yeah. Councilwoman, the only other thing I wanted to mention is that we have reviewed the term sheet that the Cleveland International Fund provided to the project. This term sheet was provided at the time when the project cost had not increased, and there was no understanding that any additional debt was going to be needed. Therefore, the additional City of Cleveland money of $1.7 million, the Cuyahoga County money of $1.7 million, and now the Finance Fund money of $1.5 million are all funding that was not contemplated at the time the Cleveland International Fund negotiated its involvement in the project. I have not talked directly to Cleveland International Fund, but this to me is a factor that would explain the Cleveland International Fund taking a position requesting better treatment than is usually the case in their projects.
So to
You have
me,
the sheet that was just handed to
Yes.
us? Okay.
Yes, sir.
so Mr. Chairman,
This sheet that, to answer my colleague's question, I assume you handed this.
Yes, sir. We received that and passed it on.
so Mr. Chairman, I was just wondering why we couldn't all just share the same position, and then I'd be happy to, I wouldn't have any concerns at all.
Okay?
Because I get what the market did to the project. It was not something that the developer did. It wasn't something that the city or the county did. And so we need to attract more money, and I don't have any problem with that. It's just that we're all at risk. And I like us all to be at risk together.
Okay.
Isn't that a fair perspective?
Well, let's,
I'm not sure.
we'll let
Chairman,
you-
there's a request by Adam to speak, but they're not done with me. So
What's
it's
that?
It's your call, sir. Adam wishes to speak, but
Yeah, I got that. The questions are being directed to you. We'll get Mr. Fishman up there to speak.
Yep.
And if you say, I'm not comfortable answering a question, that's a different story. And I understand when you get a capital stack that looks as aggressive as this has been, and you get a project that is, I think, pretty well along the way as far as completion, and its impact is going to be, I think, significant. We want to know as many facts as we can, and quite frankly, this is, to my recollection, in my 12 years, is the first time we've been asked to do this, where we've gotten in a project and then been asked, but by the same token, it's also the first time in this length of time that we've been seeing inflation go up to 8 and 9%, and even higher than our construction costs out there. So with that, any other questions?
I read everything you sent me.
if I may, Councilwoman, I would also note, and I'm going to take the chair's invitation to defer the exact details to Adam, but there's been additional equity investments by several parties. Individual members of the President's Council have put in additional money as equity. The developer himself has put in additional money as equity, and there's also an additional party who's in the position of a guarantor who's put in a substantial additional money of equity. So there has been additional equity put into the project as well as this additional debt.
And I recognize that these are unusual times, and I also recognize that having been involved with private equity investors in the past, if you come in at a later investor, you don't come in at the same level. Ironically, you actually come in at a higher level because that's what it takes to complete a project. So latter people can come in, ironically, at a better position than the first folks. Sadly,
Yeah, but you don't give that away first. We kind of push back.
well, yeah, we pushed back, but I still lost the bet on when I did it in private equity because in order to get the project done, you need to have the additional money out there. So I've just seen that. Ms. Simon, you have a question?
I have a few questions. The first is, I just want to find out who voted yes today at that meeting. Were they all administrative employees?
Correct, Councilwoman. The four
Correct,
yes
yeah.
votes were no's who are in the county class of members.
Who were they?
Matt Carroll, Sarah Parks Jackson, Naila Bird, and Michael Chambers.
Okay, and so the only yes votes were coming from the administration, and the either abstention or no vote came from non-employees of the county.
That's correct.
And they have an objective view of this lending process, correct?
Was there a no vote? I'm sorry, you
I
said
thought,
there
what,
was
how many?
a no vote, and I heard I didn't hear a no vote.
Two abstentions?
3.
3. So nobody actually voted no, but they were no, yes. They did not vote yes.
Councilwoman, I would only note that the 4 administration representatives are all senior members of the administration who do in fact have experience in finances and managing large projects. So I would not discount their votes.
Really? Oh, I'm just pointing out that the yes votes only came from the administration, the same administration that decided to hurry up a meeting today. I understand you and Brendan Doyle and the administration rushed to have this meeting July 17th, this morning, to rush this through instead of coming to the board with this request back in February. That's true, correct?
Councilwoman, in February, the situation was different, and we were not being asked to change our payment priority, nor were we being asked to go level with the finance fund. The finance fund investment was not even known to us back in
Mr.
February.
Hurtak, you were asked to change the county's position in February, to remove us as a shared second, correct?
That is what was asked in February. That's correct.
And you, in your department, tried to bypass going to the loan committee and get this done without counsel. I have the history in front of me, and I heard this, what you were trying to do, correct?
Councilman, I respectfully disagree. The law department advised us that that change would need to be approved by council, and legislation to that effect was introduced.
Well, that legislation was not introduced until our last council meeting. So why in February did you not go to the lending committee with this requested change?
So with respect, Councilman, the legislation was introduced.
So we had the
several
legislation was
meetings ago.
introduced.
In
It got-
December, we passed it.
It got pulled.
It got
The second
pulled.
one- The second one got pulled.
Well, okay, right. It got pulled because you never went to the loan committee. I want to know why you didn't go to the loan committee. As soon as this was requested of the county, why you didn't go to the loan committee in February?
Councilwoman, we were advised by the law department that the body that needed to vote again was county council, and legislation to that effect was introduced.
No, I understood that the charter requires these loans, and practice historically has gone through this loan committee. That's been the history, and that's the concern of the chair and the vice chair of the committee. Do you agree with that, that that's their expressed concern?
Councilman, Chair Anthony, I always get this wrong, I believe it's Tavares, expressed that concern very strongly. In fact, however, it is not a legal requirement for them to have a second discussion, but we felt it was prudent under these circumstances, given the amount of discussion that occurred, even though there is now no request to take off the mortgage. The taking off the mortgage was the serious issue. That's been dropped. Even though that's been dropped, even though we feel the loan is sound and is within our guidelines, we felt it was prudent to request.
Okay, I
a
hear you thought
discussion.
it was prudent. I'm very disturbed that you, the administration, bypassed the loan committee, even though there's no legal requirement, even though every other loan goes through that process. And there was a decision made not to go through that process because what was asked of the county, in my opinion, was unreasonable, with no reason why, given that we were going to be subordinate then from a shared second to a lower position. You keep saying that even in your PowerPoint that somehow county retains subordinate position. We do, but it's further down. And I don't, so please, when you talk about we have a subordinate position, why don't you talk about that it's been subordinated further down the chain? And we're not going to get paid back when this collapses. I'm very concerned. I understand that there's inflation in supply chain, but that's shifted now. That's not even the trend we're going. We're going the other direction. My concern is how this was handled by the department, by you, by the administration, bypassing the committee, and having a request that almost happened, without people intervening and seeing that this was irregular. And here we are with the administration voting yes, and other parties not joining in because they're concerned about the process. And we're detouring from what's been done in the past. Now, you can hang your hat on some legality, but that's not acceptable to me. And there's a reason why you bypassed this and waited till today, this morning, to go to the board. And you don't have unanimity. So those are my concerns, Chair. It's not a question of whether this is a worthy project. I thought it was worthy in December, and I think it's worthy today. But we need to have a secure position, and I would ask that this come back in a different format, and then I would consider the 1.7. But when we keep getting pushed further down, and these are taxpayer money, this is county taxpayers, and the way this happened, is disturbing and suspicious to me.
We have a member of the law department here. Are you privy to what was given as far as the advice back in February in regards to the manner and the procedural steps that were taken?
This is Jared Zabertowski from the Law Department. Yes, I was included in several of those conversations. However, I would want to check with my boss, Rick Maniloff, with respect to confidentiality of those conversations and who we owe that duty to before I speak in public about it.
Okay, well, that's certainly within the purview as far as protecting confidentiality. However, this body has been challenged by one of our colleagues that the law department was the one, whether you were the body that provided the guidance or not, as to whether or not it was necessary to, and now my understanding is that the committee had already provided, that they had already given one, they had one hearing already prior to this. Is that correct?
Councilman, in November, this loan came to the Community Improvement Corporation through its regular process. It was fully discussed. It was supported unanimously. It came to this body where it was discussed in Committee of the Whole at the December meeting and received full support.
Okay, so now, in between that time, there was a substitute resolution that was submitted. It was later pulled, as I recall, so at least that was my recollection of the facts in regards to it, and whether or not how the council got its advice via the county legal department. It came to you, and you are telling this body that was where that decision was, that you did not need to go for this, to go to outside the independent review.
Mr. Chairman, first, I think it's a fine point, but I would note we did not pull the legislation to amend the original loan terms. It was left and not moved forward as we reviewed the situation. But I take responsibility as Director of Development for making the determination after consulting with our law department that it was necessary to introduce the legislation. We determined that if we're going to not have a mortgage, that's a material change that ought to be discussed with council. Secondly, it was my decision 10 days ago to inform the developer that because of these two business changes, we'd have to review the entire project finance. We asked for and got, thanks to Rebecca Molino and Tracy Nichols working over the weekend, we got a full representation, which we discussed internally, respread, and attempted to bring it to our CIC. The CIC had already scheduled their next meeting for Wednesday of this week, which is not timely with regard to having it discussed before council. Therefore, we concluded we needed to request a special meeting.
Okay, and the special meeting was requested to only be based on the timing of the calendar.
It's necessary in order to be held before county council votes. I will also note that a difference of 2 weeks in approval of this loan and closing is material because due to the situation where the senior lender is awaiting approval of the 3 new loans, there has been a temporary difficulty with cash, which is placing the general contractor in some distress.
So we're talking about the 3 loans, all total stacked up would be, let's see, 1.7, 1.7, that's 3.4, plus another 1.5 total is what we're saying here. So we're talking about 4.3, and the senior lender is loaning how much in the way of the stack?
The senior lender is $33 million.
Okay, and so what is their position if they don't get the 4.3?
I have spoken directly with the regional vice president, who's informed me that all 3 loans need to close before they will feel comfortable continuing to disperse.
Okay, and that's within the next 2 weeks? Is that what you're saying, that the senior lender is who?
Huntington.
Okay, and so, but for that senior lender, does this project go forward?
As I stated, Councilman, work continues. The cash situation is becoming very difficult for the general contractor.
And as we've found out in our own learning, that every month that our jail doesn't get built, the costs go up. Whether or not the inflation is going at a slower pace, we would all like to hope it does, but it doesn't mean it's eradicated. Truman, do you have questions? I think you did.
I do. Thank you. Appreciate that. Through the chair, my question centers around the risk involved with moving down as far as our position and priority here. Do you think the risk is it's worth the risk to do this in this particular situation, and all in all, when everything is balanced out? And as Councilwoman Simon said, I mean, this isn't like it's, private investments here. This is the public money. So I guess that my question to you is the risk involved. Is it worth it in your opinion?
Councilman, yes, this is an appropriate risk based on our review of the full financial information that was provided to us, the ratios of the debt service coverage being above our guideline, and the ratio of the loan to value being below our guideline. This is an appropriate risk.
All right, I appreciate that. And then the second question I have is, do you know whether the city of Cleveland also agreed to subordinate its position?
Councilman, not only do I know, and I will tell you, but also Terry Hamilton Brown will confirm this when she speaks, but as to the new debt, the city of Cleveland has agreed and is negotiating the same intercreditor agreement we are to be in the same position as us behind the other debt.
And then last, just with respect to the abstentions, could you just clarify what you had said? I know two of the individuals, what was the position of two of the individuals?
Michael Obie and Brian Hall are individual investors through the President's Council and also members of their board. Therefore, they had to abstain from the vote this morning.
Okay, all right, I appreciate it. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair?
So they're, just to qualify the comments received by Mr. Tuma. So the two abstentions, you're saying to this body, withheld their votes because of a conflict of interest in their mind, because they're investors.
They're required to, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Yes,
and they
sir.
did not vote no.
That's correct.
Okay. Ms. Simon?
Oh, thank you. I just have questions to clarify some timing issues. When we received the substitute first reading to change the position of the county from shared second, was there a secured position anticipated in that legislation? I don't recall there was.
Thank you, Councilman. Again, trying to be very straight about this.
Thanks.
The legislation that got introduced, I think, almost 2 months ago now, to
May.
amend the original resolution, that legislation simply said no lien.
Right.
That was, as I stated earlier, we felt with consulting with our law department that needed to be something that council would discuss. Before you today, the substitute that has now replaced the legislation is different. We retain a subordinate lien. We're clarifying that because of
Just to be clear, myself, when you say we have a subordinate lien now, but it's lower down from second share to fourth, right?
Councilman, it's a matter of opinion if it's fourth or third, because
Okay.
the city's HUD 108 was always going to have priority.
But we have less priority than we did. That's all I want to, whether it's third or fourth, we have less priority.
Yes.
And what you introduced to us in May gave us no security in terms of a lien. And you did not go to the loan committee with such a drastic change, which is very disturbing to me. And I wanted to ask our law department about the conflict when we're the client and we can waive any conflict.
Thank you. This is Jared Zabertowski. We do have two clients. One is the administration, the executive, and one is the county council. That sometimes presents problems, and there could be a way around it. I would want to check with my boss before I let confidential information that's confidential to the executive out in public, just as I would do the same to council if I was working on a project with you that was privileged.
Okay. Because this seems to be an issue that's very important to my colleague, Ms. Simon, we will be prepared to, before we go much further, to take a break. If you can verify from your boss, so we can do that in place. But fortunately, there's no reason to stop the conversations that we have. We can still listen to all those, and you're on record. Please be aware, I don't think it's appropriate for me to take a vote on this matter until you come back and give us a response. So if it means we'll still be here at 5 o'clock, I'll still be here at 5 o'clock. Hopefully, we can get that answer. But in the meantime, I would think that you have another member of your staff, I think, sitting in the back, so he could maybe track down whomever you need to get the clearance on the conflict aspect of that. Let me just, again, Mr. Tuma raised the question of the parties that are 1.7 million, 1.7 million, 1.5 million. Are they going to all be identical?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's 1.7 for us, 1.5 new debt for the city of Cleveland, 1.5 finance fund, and we are all identically sharing the same position, both in payment priority and in a shared security position.
And are all having to make this same adjustment to make sure the project continues on?
The intercreditor has all three of us in making the same agreements, both with Cleveland International Fund and with Huntington Bank.
So that would be theoretically a pari passu that with all members are all going to be treated the same.
Correct, as to the new debt from the city.
Yeah, right, yes, this is what we're talking about.
Correct.
Right, which I think is that you were wondering whether we will all be pari passu, and I assume my colleagues all understand that that means we will all be treated equally, so they have already stepped up. Is there another meeting that any of those individual other groups have to have before that 2-week period of time?
Councilman Tron, it is my understanding that the other two loans, if not closed already, are prepared to close along with us on Tuesday. And again, the issue of timing is not from those parties. It is from the situation with the senior lender and the general contractor and cash.
Okay, but the city of Cleveland has to be asking these same questions or similar questions. Have they already resolved these in their mindset to go forward?
Councilman, since Terry Hamilton Brown is here, I want to indicate that she will, in just a moment, speak precisely to that point.
Okay.
Right here.
Any other questions in regards to Mr. Hurdick right now?
Just one quick question.
We will bring and
Cheryl.
ask her to come up and make that statement. Yes.
Just interested in the investment of the board members of the loan committee. Why are they investing, and in what way are they investing in this project that the county has such an interest in?
Thank you, Councilwoman. Brian Hall and Michael Obie are members of the President's Council. This is an association of black business owners, well-established, long-standing in the community. And the President's Council, among other things, has entered into a business relationship with the Arcturus Fund, which is our Opportunity Zone Fund. And independently of that, the members of the President's Council have expressed interest in investing in projects of this kind. So in this particular project, each of these business owners made their own decision as part of the President Council to invest a portion of their own personal capital as members of the President's Council in this project. So they've made that decision as any other private equity investor would make that decision.
So would
Based on
they
your
end up with
slide,
a better
number 5.
position? Would they be in a better position?
Councilman, no.
What five? Where is
They
it?
are true equity.
Okay,
They have
okay,
not
got
asked for
it, got
any
it. They're
rights.
below, okay.
No rights.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay. Yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm very pleased to bring forward an old friend and colleague, now serving as Director of Economic Development for the City of Cleveland, Terry Hamilton Brown.
Okay.
Long time.
The longtime friend, I don't think it was not reflective of anybody's age, because I can guarantee I can beat you.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
As Paul just introduced.
Excuse me,
I'm-
Ms. Brown, can you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, I am
Into the
Terry,
microphone, too. Thank you.
Terry Hamilton Brown, Interim Director of Economic Development for the City of Cleveland.
And welcome back to the county.
Thank you, thank you. As Mr. Hurdick just described, the Myers project is of great importance to the City of Cleveland, both to Mayor Bibb and the administration and Council President Griffin, who is the councilman of the Fairfax neighborhood where the project is currently under construction. Both Mayor Bibb and Council President have been advised of the changes and the needs the needs first and why we are making changes and providing additional support to the project. And the city, through my presentation today, is here to commit to you that we continue to stand behind the project, and we are committing an additional $1.5 million as a loan in a shared position with the county and the finance fund. We're doing this for several reasons. One, the project is addressing the food desert designation that this neighborhood has for many years, and will provide, obviously, fresh food options to the residents and the community. It's also a very important mixed-use development. You heard comments about that during the open comment period. And importantly, it's development occurring along Opportunity Corridor, and there are other important developments that are happening across the street. You know, the IBM project was one of the first, but immediately adjacent to this development to the south, there are additional residential apartments currently under construction, and more opportunities and developments further along the corridor. So we have tax increment financing, TIF, in this project awarded already. We have a $9 million Section 108 loan, and as a result of, or in response to, closing this gap that has happened for a myriad of reasons, we're adding an additional $1.5 million. So I assure you we remain committed. We are, to answer your question directly, ready to close on the additional funds when the other lenders will close on the additional funds.
Does the city need any additional meetings or anything of that nature, assuming that everything goes forward with all the other bodies in that
Not
respect?
for the additional 1.5.
That's right. The additional 1.5
No.
is what we're really talking about here, which is caused, as a reflection of the inflation, I assume. And you are hearing all the conversations about the city of Cleveland's status with the county, that you will be at that same status, whether it's third position, fourth position, depending on where the HUD money and other funds are. But that status is going to be putting you in the exact same status as the city of Cleveland, as the county.
For the 1.5.
Yes, for the 1.5, for the new money.
Absolutely.
Yes, for the new money, yes.
And we understand that and have agreed to that.
Yes, ma'am.
My concerns were about the third priority for the EB5, which I thought we all learned about EB5 together. I thought it was equity, so I thought it would either be on level with us or behind us. That was my only concern. And why is the city allowing them to be treated differently?
Well, I can't speak to that, as I only joined the city a month ago to work on this project. But we have always treated it as equity, and so the additional money that the developer is also bringing to the project to address the cost overruns or increased costs will fall below us as subordinate lenders.
And do you have any expectation as far as what I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You didn't hear another?
Well, no, I
was
still
gonna
don't understand why they get a better position than we do. I just want to understand that. I guess that's an Adam question.
I believe the developer will
That
address
Adam
to
over I
that.
see over your shoulder?
Yes, he is there.
Okay. Other questions for the city of Cleveland while we have the city of Cleveland on there? Okay, so at this point in time, all your meetings you need to have, all your committee meetings, everything is in place. You understand that you're coming in at the same position with your new money as the county would be with our funds, and you're getting no priority whatsoever in regards to it on those new funds.
No priorities, but
No priority over us. I don't care
no
about.
priority over you. That's correct.
There's going to be priorities. We
we
have a
have-
chart where you're going to be ahead of a lot of other folks.
Yeah,
As
I
will
mean,
we be.
we have structured it as a non-amortizing loan. We have personal guarantees, corporate guarantees, and the same lien collateral as you. We've looked at the cash flow. We believe that getting the property, the building completed and occupied, that the economics for the operation is strong and that we will be able to be repaid once it's completed. The risk is not completing it.
Okay, so the Huntington Bank conversation that was expressed to us a little bit ago about pressure from them in the next 2 weeks, what is your interpretation of what that would be? You
Actually,
are
it was-
pari passu
Yeah.
with Mr. Hurdick as far as economic development directors here, so we'll.
Yeah, it was a really intense week, last week, in terms of discussions with the developer and Huntington and the contractor, right? The original deadline was to try and close last Friday. And when the county made the decision that they needed approvals, they went to the bank and asked for additional time. And so that is where we are because of the need to come here and to do this correctly.
Okay, thank you. Questions in regards to any other comments made there? Okay. Mr. Fishman, let's put you in the hot seat. You've heard the conversations. Please put your name on the record, and we'll go from there.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Fishman from Fairmount Properties. I'm joined today by our Vice President of Finance, Jeff Steck, our General Counsel, Rebecca Molyneux, and our Executive Vice President of Capital Markets, Kevin Kessinger. Should we have additional detailed questions? Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the council, for taking the time today. We greatly appreciate it, and we greatly appreciate you doing this on a schedule that is compressed, and I could talk about that compression. You've heard a lot of things already, and I'm going to try and be as brief as possible. Developing a grocery store in the Fairfax neighborhood has been very difficult, but it's very important. We have done this as both a private development enterprise, but also as a show of goodwill to reinvest and recommit into a Cleveland neighborhood that has long seen disinvestment. I think that's in no small part why the President's Council members have also chosen to invest. We closed this original capital stack without any county involvement, but of course, when we ran into some of these challenges, we did ask the county. One thing the interim director did not mention is the city has also invested post our original closing an additional $200,000 in streets money, and that's sort of their 1.7 to the extent there's some parity in the 1. You guys haven't asked why 1.5 and 1.7, but if you had, they invested an additional $200,000 in grant proceeds to complete some road work. So the bank has been a good friend to this project, and I'm not here to tell you they haven't been. They have continued to fund while we have tried to work through these challenges of priority and structure for some time. However, they have called a timeout and have asked us to get this fully wrapped up before they continue to fund. The net result, of course, is there hasn't been significant funding out in the field while our contractors, including MBE and FBE and Cleveland Small Business Contractors, continue to work. Proceeds have not been moving forward through the system. So we are at a critical timing juncture to get this process closed. The bank, as Interim Director Stevens indicated, gave us till the end of Q2 to get that done. That time has come and gone now, almost a couple of weeks. So we are on, to say we're on borrowed time is a stretch. We are under significant, maybe the most pressure I've ever been under in my career to get this project back on track and really need your support to do that. A couple things worth mentioning, I guess, in terms of your position. The HUD 108 loan is funded by abatement and TIF proceeds. So it is essentially, for all intent and purposes, almost entirely self-amortizing. The Cleveland International Fund, which is invested as a loan into our parent entity, but as equity into the project, that is the way CIF typically invests into projects. It is no different than as was presented to you when this loan was approved back in November. That really hasn't changed. What has changed, of course, is their absolute request for priority payment. And Mr. Chairman, to both Councilwoman Stevens and Simon, that wouldn't be our choice either, but it is where we find ourselves. They have drawn an intractable line and said they are unwilling to negotiate the priority of repayment, and they have an absolute right to take that position and essentially halt the completion of this refinancing. It is a dark road, should we go down that road, for them and us. But nonetheless, that is the position they have staked out, and we spent months and months trying to negotiate that position to a place that we thought would be more palatable to the public bodies, and we were unsuccessful. So we find ourselves where we are today. That is, if we're going to move forward, this is the structure this is the only structure we believe we can move forward with. Important to note, and I think both the Director Hertig, who I thought did an admirable job, and Interim Director Hamilton Brown, also an admirable job. There's over $3 million of our own additional cash going into this project, ourselves and our investors. We are signing guarantees from our company, myself, and my business partner to personally guarantee these loans to the city and the county. We are doing that with a capital stack that you all can see has some stress to it. So we are willing to take additional risk with our own capital, our partners' capital, and our own personal guarantees to move this project forward, not because it's going to be some great economic reward for ourselves. At this point, it is not. But it is a commitment we have made to this community to bring groceries and apartment living to the Fairfax community. So yeah, are we in a tough spot? Absolutely. But we need your help. This is the only monies we've asked for of the county. I am here to answer each and any questions you may have. But I also want to make sure I don't, you've been generous with your time already. I don't want to overstay my welcome. So with that, I will allow questions to be brought forward.
I think you can tell from this body that we take this, all matters that come before us, very seriously. So
Yes.
time is not, as unless somebody tells me otherwise, is not going to be the critical factor. It's trying to get it right is going to be the critical factor. And Ms. Stevens, early on, if you heard some of the questions, her early comments or questions were about the total capital stack, and I don't want to speak for you, but that was something that was raised earlier on, and I figure it got deferred and got deferred again to you and to your body. So I would like to hope you could address that specifically.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The new sources and uses capital stack, the sources are $33 million senior first mortgage from Huntington National Bank. HUD 108 loan, that is a $9 million face loan. That is the repayment sources, tax increment financing, but that is a loan from the city to us from proceeds they received from HUD and of course, supported by a CDBG allocation as HUD 108 loans are. The current equity is $8.39 million, $8.39 million. Any characterization of a decrease in equity was, again, because potentially somehow the treatment of CIF, which has and always and will always be a loan to our entity and an equity investment into the project, the way CIF typically, and I think in each and every case, does business, at least the transactions I'm aware of, has not changed. We have PACE proceeds for
Once again, how much was the CIF?
$5 million. We have PACE proceeds, and that is an investment associated, I think, as you well know, for projects that have achieved a very high standard of energy efficiency of $9 million. Those proceeds are already invested in the project and have been spent by the PACE lender. And as you know, PACE loans are retired through a special assessment that is baked already into the cash flow numbers that you have seen and the county has reviewed. then the county loan of $1.7 million, the city loan and grant of a total of $1.7 million, $1.5 million loan, $200,000 grant, and the $1.5 million loan from the finance fund. From our perspective, so that total capital stack of $64,290,950, roughly. From our perspective, your position since we last came forward is, and this may be foreign to hear, but there's additional $3 million of actual cash equity in the deal that wasn't in the deal when you first approved this loan. And you are now, and the $1.5 million for the finance fund is primarily there as a set-aside for capitalized interest expense. So it provides the ability to pay capitalized interest while the project leases up, and it's off to a good start from a leasing standpoint, although, you know, we're like all other things in this project, we are a little behind, so our leasing's a little behind. Meijer is actively working in the space right now to open a grocery store in October. Our biggest, of course, concern that anybody would ever have is that this process, should it get sidelined, and this process would get sidelined. No, there's no question about this. This process would get sidelined if this council can't help us move forward. Should this project get sidelined, it would give Meijer a significant opportunity to not open their store. So with that, I stand before you with great concern.
So at this point in time, these three subcomponents that are being asked at the bank, by the bank to finalize in order for them to go forward, and they've given the window of time. None of us like to work on tight timelines if we don't have to, but that timeline, at least from understanding the testimony that's come before this, has been laid out at the direction of the senior lender at the bank, giving us an extra 2 weeks. Is that what I understood, Mr. Hurdick, that we've got to keep things moving on a quick basis in order to make sure that they're satisfied or not?
Chairman, if I misspoke, I just want to correct that.
Okay.
We're not given 2 additional weeks. We've been given until tomorrow.
Oh, okay, all right, but 2 weeks to complete, but we've already used some of that time, is what you're saying.
Mr. Chairman, as I understood it from the bank, the bank's, and just so we're clear, the bank doesn't expect the county to fund this
No, I
loan,
got that.
but the bank has asked that we have a capital stack that's closed, where sources meet uses, and for that to happen, we need your legislative approval to move forward on this loan. We are already outside their stated window of the time we had, and again, this has all been delayed to this point and become this timing challenge because we all were working, I would have to say, in good faith. We were all working to deal with these structural issues that Councilperson Stevens and Councilperson Simon have both articulately described. I hear you both, and I'm not here to tell you you are mistaken. I'm here to tell you that, unfortunately, this is the construct we find ourselves in.
And we have seen, as just by in my own personal business, we've seen a reflection of the interest rates getting bounced up every 6 weeks or 8 weeks. We've seen that the rates have gone up.
Mr. Chairman, as to interest rates, this was a floating rate construction loan. At that point in time, we hadn't seen a significant movement in interest rates in 10 years. So as interest rates rose, our capitalized interest expense on the outstanding balance of the loan went up, and this is all already in your budget, but that was almost $1 million hit in the wrong direction. And as to comments about inflationary pressures softening, I actually think that's true in the construction markets, but we missed that window when we bought out. The construction of this project was in the teeth of the highest inflation, and this project is at this point fully bought out. So even if prices were to plummet in the next month, it may help the cost of groceries if the grocery store actually opens, but it won't help our construction cost at all, unfortunately.
Okay, and we've just received a distribution of the capital stack.
That's the same thing I just read off.
Assume it's the same thing you have?
Yes.
Yeah, it was probably provided for the Fairfax Opportunity summary for the July, as of this date, July 2023. Thank you. Ms.
I have a
Simon?
question.
Yes.
Of Mr. Fishman, if the legislation had passed that was presented to us in May we would not have any security at all, correct? That was the initial ask of you and your company.
Mr. Chairman to the councilperson, by the way, is that the correct nomenclature in this meeting? Yeah, Mr. Chairman to the councilperson. Yeah, we have spent these last many months trying to figure out a structural solution to the challenges to the challenges of the nature of the CIF investment. And that was one potential solution, but it was made clear to us that that was not going to be palatable to this body. So you know, we're just trying to find a way to get to the finish line, you know?
Yeah,
so.
we're the taxpayers, so
Yeah, no,
that's
I'm
a little
aware.
bit, when we saw this in May, that we would absolutely have no security on an already, you know, tenuous deal, it was a little,
Well, Mr. Chairman, to the
upsetting
Mr.
to
Chairman to
me.
the councilperson, you have the Fairmount Properties guarantee, my personal guarantee, my business partner's personal guarantee, and now you have a mortgage. What happened then did not come before this body because we understand, but now you do have the same kind of assurances that the city and the finance fund have.
So for clarity, we are in a much better position than we would have been in May had they gone forward with what was being thrown out as a concept.
And while you may disagree with this, Mr. Chairman, I would submit to you, you're in a much better position than you were when this was first approved in November, because there's $3 million of additional equity, and the finance fund provides adequate coverage for the capitalized interest. So I believe while your priority has been modified slightly, I think you are, as a lender, in a stronger, whether you would say significantly stronger is a matter of viewpoint, but I would say that, let me put it this way, the capital stack is in a stronger position, and therefore your loan and likelihood of repayment is stronger because our ability to finish the project is stronger, and that's, I think, there's not a lot of, I don't think there's a lot of significant controversy that once the project is finished and leased, there's adequate debt service to cover your debt service, and there's adequate proceeds to repay you in the event of a capital event.
So this committee, and should this get voted out of this committee, our council tomorrow evening is the last body that to make that work.
Mr. Chairman, we are in the hopes of this working. We have a lot of people keyed up to proceed immediately to closing tomorrow evening and Wednesday morning, because we are living day to day right now. So this is a day-to-day situation that needs to get wrapped up. Should you choose not to vote it out, then
You just stay with my question. and
yes,
we'll-
yes,
okay,
we are ready to go immediately. Sorry,
So,
that would be a simpler answer.
From
Sorry.
that standpoint, there is not another body you're going to get presented to this evening that somebody else has got to do anything else? Okay.
No, it's up to you guys.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to finish up. It's not a better deal.
I didn't mean
I'm
to cut you
sorry.
off. I
This is-
apologize if I did.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a better deal. The loan debt coverage, loan to value ratio is worse, and there's no way to sugarcoat this. So you just want to get it done. It's unfortunate. It's a good project. The way this was handled is just suspect to me, and it's putting us in a worse position. And, you know, it's up to the members whether they want to take this risk of this, you know, not happening. But the other question I have is, I guess back to Paul before we end. I had a couple more questions. So I'll let the chair finish up with whoever else has questions of Mr. Fishman.
Is there anyone else to come before us, Mr. Hurdick? Okay. Mr. Fishman, is there anything else you'd like to conclude with, or you can get Mr. Hurdick up here?
Again, I appreciate your commitment to process and the time you're investing in this, and I appreciate
Oh,
your
one more
consideration.
from Mr. Fishman, or maybe this is a Paul question, or both. I don't recall knowing about the E5 or the investment from the equity in December. Was it fully disclosed in December about that part of the stack?
It's probably a Paul question.
Paul, okay, Paul.
The chair to the councilwoman, yes, we actually reviewed the tape of the committee of the whole meeting, and we did describe the EB5 as coming in as equity, and we did mention the structure that's been discussed here today, which is the common structure of the EB5 making a loan to another party who then invests the equity. It was not highlighted We did not analyze it as in the way we're analyzing it today, but it was mentioned. It was mentioned because EB5 or Cleveland International Fund is often a part of our projects.
Usually, we don't ask that many questions because the equity would come below the county's secured position, which is what Vice Chair Stevens brought up, because that would not been something I would be probing. And unfortunately, now I guess we need to probe because this is highly irregular.
And Councilwoman, as has been discussed, as Adam has said, it is not what the project wanted, but it's the position the Cleveland International Fund has taken, and they have the legal right to take that position.
I'm not questioning the position they're taking. They're taking hard stance in the private sector, but we're being asked in the public to assume the risk that the private sector doesn't want to assume. And my problem, again, is how this happened. I don't have any further questions of Mr. Fishman, but of Mr. Hertig about why. It's up to you if you want to stand there. I guess my concern is how this happened. And why did you wait from May of 23rd, of when this resolution amendment or substitute was introduced, till now to rush a meeting with the loan committee? That should have been done in my position is that should have been done in February. It wasn't done, but you thought you didn't have to go through them legally. But at some point you learned through the law department, which I'm going to hear from at some point after the meeting, that you should go to loan committee. Why did you wait so long? Why wait?
Thank you, Councilwoman. And first I will say, had we known back in November that the Cleveland International Fund would take the position it took when we tried to go to closing, it would have been discussed then. We were not aware, and it didn't come to our attention until we started drafting closing documents, that they wanted this intercreditor. And as has been previously stated, it was first expressed in a different way. They wanted no mortgage. We've had some discussion just this afternoon about that. When it became clear that was not going to be done, there was further discussion of intercreditor agreements and the priorities. None of this was brought to us when the project came back in November. It was simply came to us, Cleveland International Fund is doing what they always do. They're loaning to the LLC. The LLC puts it in as equity. So the short answer to that is we simply did not know at the time. In terms of what's happened over the past couple of months, there's been exchanges of documents back and forth between lawyers. There's been negotiations of what positions can be taken. It's been further complicated by the fact that the projects had to go get this additional funding, not only the equity you've heard about, but also this additional debt funding, which is now the finance fund. So there's been a lot of dynamic discussion going on over the past 2 months. And as I said earlier to the chair, I finally pulled the plug about 10 days ago and said, we're just going to have to review the whole finances from top to bottom. At that point, we got the new information. Unfortunately, CIC had moved its meeting. It was going to have a meeting last week, which would have been great, but they had already decided to move the meeting for reasons unrelated to this transaction. They just didn't have their quorum, and they simply didn't have a regular meeting date available for us to go to them. So, as I testified before, it is prudent to go to them, whether or not it's legally required. I am glad we went this morning. Had we been able to go back in December, I much would have preferred to have the CIF discussion back then. But in terms of the finance fund money, that's been evolving, and only recently, very recently, did we know the full extent of that pari passu money that had to come in.
That meeting was originally scheduled for last week, you say?
There was at one time a Community Improvement Corporation, just a regular meeting. This was not on the agenda.
Right.
And for reasons completely unrelated to this deal, the convenience of the members, they made the decision they were going to have to push it till this Wednesday. Had nothing to do with this deal, but they had already informed their members, clear, your schedule's released, it's next Wednesday. It was unfortunate. I did, in fact, talk to the chair to see if they could put the regular meeting back on. The chair let me know that other members had already changed their calendars. We had no choice.
So this morning's meeting would not have taken place this morning, it would have taken place last week. It would have gone and could have been dropped in as an agenda item. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me this latitude. I just have to say that it's, I can't support this in the way it's structured and how this came before us. I think there was an attempt to remove our security in May to avoid going through the committee, the loan committee, because they would have probably said, at least the non-administrative members probably would have been outcrying that this is terrible. We're now behind the taxpayers are behind the fund that are non-county residents, and we're asked to be the flexible party on the taxpayers' back. And I have a problem with how this happened, and that's why I can't support this otherwise worthy project. Had this happened differently, and the loan committee would have been addressed initially, and everything would have been a little bit more straightforward about even the investment with the fund in December that we just glossed over, not knowing that we'd be below them. So it's unfortunate the way this happened. If we could stack back up, I would happily support this if we would go back to that second position. But I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm here that there's inflexibility on the private side, but want us as taxpayers to be flexible. And I don't predict great things coming of this, unfortunately, but I hope it does.
And there was a question in regards to, do we have a response? The only,
Yes.
item.
Chairman, I do. I was able to talk to Law Director Rick Maniloff and former Law Director Greg Huth, and you guys want to, Greg or Rick, they have some share.
Okay. And you were here during the entire meeting, so I assume that you heard the dialogue as far as the questions and the comments. So are you comfortable answering the question one way or the other?
Greg Huth, I guess Assistant Law Director now. Well, I'm going to attempt to. I'm not going to suggest that my memory is perfect in any way so that I am violating any privilege, but I do know that this body has the authority under Section 802.04 of the County Code to make changes in whatever terms the CIC approves. So you gave yourself that authority back when you adopted that section of the code. So there was the ability is there for this body to do what you're doing. Or would be able to do it without going back to the CIC.
So there would not have been a requirement even necessarily to go to that meeting, is what you're suggesting?
Correct.
Okay. Questions?
I'm sorry. Is it ever necessary to go through the loan committee then?
Well, this specifically refers to making changes.
Okay, no, so
So
it's your
then I would say that initially, yes.
Okay, so even, is it a legal requirement that these loan applications go through the loan committee first? Is that a legal requirement, or that's just the charter saying, or good practice? I'm not quite sure what you're saying.
Honestly, I'm not either, because this body was first put in place back in 1982. And the agreement that exists between the county and the CIC from 1982 describes certain types of loans that were then recognized under the ORC. It's primarily industrial revenue development bonds. But it has been this body, or the county administration's practice to go to this body for this kind of input.
And don't you
analysis.
think with such a substantial change in the loan structure and position of the county that it would have been just as prudent and necessary to go back to that loan committee with such a substantial change?
Are you asking me as an attorney?
I'm asking you, isn't that why you're sitting here, standing before us as Assistant Law Director? I mean, you made a pronouncement that it's good practice and prudent to go to this committee at the initial stage of an application, but I'm asking you, wouldn't it be equally as prudent to go before that committee when there's a substantial change in the change of the security position of the taxpayers?
Well, I will say this. I don't know if any of you called back to my confirmation hearing, but I was specifically advised not to get out in front of either the council or the administration on policy issues. So I'm not going to do that.
But you just did it. You just said that it was prudent.
No, I said it was a good practice.
It was good practice. I'm
It's been-
sorry.
it's been
Okay,
the
I'm going
past
to
practice,
change my
so.
word from prudent to best practice.
Yes.
Would that practice not be equally as important to go back when there's a substantial change in the security position of the county?
As they did today, with material changes, yes.
Finally.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Well, at this point in time, we have a substitute resolution that's been moved and seconded, and it's now been substituted for the original legislation. That's before this body as far as whether to move it into council. And my assumption would be it's for second reading suspension. If that's...
So we are in discussion, and so I could
we are.
move the previous question
That's
to get us to
exactly-
vote.
That's exactly where I'm going.
Okay.
Yep, that's exactly where
So
I'm
I
going.
move the previous question.
Okay, it's been moved that we have the vote on it. However, I think that it's appropriate with where we are at this point to have discussion in regards to before voting.
We already voted on the substitute, so now it's on whether we're going to move that substitute forward to the next council meeting under a recommendation of suspension
that's correct.
of passage. Okay.
And I believe that this is an appropriate time to have discussion. We've heard Ms. Simon's position, I think, at this point in time. The chair will make its comments.
As someone whose career has been based on public lending and who currently does projects similar to this one on a regular basis, on my most recent deal, what I set aside to pay my bank's continuing interest during construction was $250,000, and to date it's $360,000 that I've paid the bank on a baby deal. So the reality is that we have not been able to control where our deals go and what has happened to them. But we continue to do urban development with the hope that our core cities and core inner-ring suburbs can be better places for our residents to live. Am I happy with the exact equity stack and capital stack? No, but I know that this deal needs to be done in order to make sure that we have fewer food deserts in the city of Cleveland. And I know that we must continue to invest when natural investment, the way the markets take place, take us to the exurbs and further beyond to do supermarket investments. Myers boxes typically happen out beyond Solon anymore as opposed to in the core city. So I'm appreciative of this kind of deal and the hard work that our colleagues and friends at the City of Cleveland have to do. After conversations with Council President Blaine Griffith and my colleague on this committee, on this council, Yvonne Conwell, who represents this district along with the council president, we collectively believe that this is the type of project we must continue to invest in. I do not like the terms for the equity for CIF, but we will continue to work with them and try to find ways for them to be more respectful of our investment. And so with that, I will support this when it's time to vote.
Newman, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think given the set of situations, the economic situations, I understand how we got here. I don't really like. I think it's more about the approach of how this was presented, lack of communication, and shortness of terms and that sort of stuff. And obviously, I don't like being losing our position of priority. That's something that I would choose not to do. But being a realistic and pragmatic individual here, I understand the nature of the economics here and the importance of the project itself. And I asked the director straight up whether or not it was worth the risk, and he said it was, and I'm going to take his word on that. And I'm going to be confident that he was correct in that assessment. So I'll support moving this forward to a full council vote.
Thank you. As chairman, I tried my best in these last 12 years to, anybody who's ever taken that microphone in front of me knows that I don't ask softball questions, and it's my desire to put forth what I believe is the best interest of the taxpayers out there. Does this have a higher degree of risk than sometimes we've experienced? Absolutely. I believe it does. With that element of risk, though, I'm also somebody that has to balance that risk with the taxpayers' money, and it's hard for me to sometimes in my own mind to separate when I take a risk personally with my money versus taking a risk with taxpayers' money. But in this particular case, I've heard enough information. I believe that this is well worth going forward, because the other side of the risk is that if this were to not go forward today and we would lose that stack, we should lose the primary lender. I have no idea what this project would look like, but I do know that historically, if you get into all the weavings of the senior lender putting pressure on, does this project get put on hold for 3 months, 6 months, a year? I have no idea, and that's not a position that I want to take a risk within the community. I did hear specifically that the folks who are coming up here and taking this microphone have their personal assets at risk. They have signed guarantees on this, and I feel very confident that if somebody were to take that position, that they too have an element of risk that is worthy of us going after as an asset, and if should it ever become necessary. So with that being said, I will take a roll call vote in regards to this so that we can put everybody on the record.
I would like a final comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say that, you know, this is no reflection of my opinion on the project. I think it's necessary and worthy. But my no vote's going to be out of the committee because of how this was I already said by the administration. It seemed secretive. It seemed like we were presented with a very bad deal, that we would have no security without going to that loan committee. And I don't trust going forward now that we're going to have straight up answers out of this department. And how this was handled was inappropriate. And I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, how to go forward, but that's another conversation to make sure that this doesn't happen again. I mean, this council was left with a bad piece of attempt to keep us unsecured or make us unsecured, and now we're here trying to make this happen. And I don't think it had to be this way. If they were forthright to begin with, maybe I would not be asking these questions. That's why I'm asking. So I'm no out of committee, but it's because of that, and I don't trust what I'm being told.
And you have every reason to have certainly your opinion in regards to it, and we've been good colleagues on this council or this committee for a long time, and I welcome and cherish the diversity of opinions that we get that are brought forth. So with that, if we can please take a roll call vote.
Mr. Schrun?
Yes.
Mr. Tuma?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Simon?
No.
The motion carries 3-1. It will be going forward to County Council for second reading suspension. That does not mean, please hear it loud and clear, that there's a guarantee. It's a guarantee that it passed out of this committee. Obviously, it needs to pass tomorrow evening in a public event that will take place at 5 o'clock tomorrow evening. So I never hoped to ever foresee what happens going forward, other than to tell you that we will have a public meeting at 5 o'clock, and I hope none of you came in anticipation that this committee by itself would have the authority to pass, but it's now moved forward to the second reading suspension.
And
there
Mr.
any-
Chair, can we please clarify who motioned and who seconded?
Yes, the motion was to adopt the proposed substitute to move forward for second reading suspension at tomorrow evening's meeting.
And who motioned?
And I seconded. Chair
Thank you.
seconded.
Thank you.
Because I'm a firm believer, this body, and just as everybody here, this body has a long history from going back 12 and a half years. I even moved and seconded for stuff that I knew I was going to vote against because I felt that the value of our discussions was more important than where I was going to vote ultimately on it. So I always wanted to have that, and I appreciate the fact that this body had the chance to hear it in discussion purposes and get the stuff on the table. So does that answer why I could? Don't be shocked sometimes if I second something and vote against it, because I believe the conversation is more valuable than sitting without the.
I agree. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, that I took quite a draconian position. I usually
okay.
don't, just the way this was approached.
No.
But I knew you guys would have the votes to discuss it.
I did not know that, since I never come into this meeting, and both these individuals have voted for it, just so the audience understands, I do not poll people beforehand, before the conversation, because I don't, some of you always just ask me, how am I going to vote? And I said, you'll let you know when I give my vote on the record. So with that being said, is there any other matter to come before this committee? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.